It's a magnificent day. It's a magnificent month, and we're going to roll right now into this wretched article. The Atlantic author about the author Ibram X. Kendi is a contributing writer at The Atlantic and the Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities and director of the Boston University Center of Anti-Racist Research. He is the author of several books, including the national award-winning Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America and How to Be an Anti-Racist. So there are going to be so many anti-white slurs. I'm not going to be able to do the quotes the whole time. I've already worked out, and I have no more time for it. It's going to be a lot of ups and downs with the hand there. So it's a he then. Is that what it is? I'm reading this for the first time. Okay, so Ibram is a contributing writer at The Atlantic and the Arthur W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities. So it's a he. So bass guitarist is here. Panzer is here. Tell everybody you know that we're having a gathering and we're changing the world. No one has had success like this. Below a Democrat donkey, the Fox News graphic read anti-white mania. It flanked Tucker Carlson's face and overtook it in size. It was unmistakable, which was the point. You know, maybe we are in contact with staff. No, you know what? I won't say anything else. The segment aired on June 25, the height of the manic attack on and redefinition of critical race theory. So manic. So these people are all just crazy. You can't disagree with anti-whiteism because that means you're crazy according to the anti-whites in their narrative. Once again, why you can't stay inside of their narrative. Yonash is here. Great to see you. Ahoy, brother. All right. It was one of his most incendiary segments of the year. Incendiary. Ooh, it's just, he's so violent. You couldn't find a person more milquetoast than Tucker Carlson. You couldn't find somebody more wimpy than Tucker Carlson. It's incendiary, like this guy's just spitting fire. Quote, the question is, and this is the question we should be meditating on day in and day out, is how do we get out of this vortex, the cycle, before it's too late, Carlson asked. How do we save this country before we become Rwanda? Now, of course, that was hyperbole. It wasn't incendiary, but maybe Ibram doesn't know that word. And so it's understandable. I'm probably just making six figures. But nonetheless, it's hyperbole that is warranted in news to get attention from folks. Anti-whites do it all the time. And so Tucker, who is a villainy, signals anti-whiteism quite a bit, doesn't he? And this is, you see, there's a lesson there that if you are inside of their story, the anti-white narrative, it doesn't matter how pathetic and apathetic you sound, they will make you out to be a fork-tongued devil that spits fire if you get in the way of anti-whiteism. Some white Americans have been led, writes Ibram, to fear that they could be massacred like the Tutsis of Rwanda. CRT equals Marxism. Marxism equals genocide every time. Read a sign at a June 23rd Proud Boys demonstration in Miami. So now you see, and this is why I've been arguing for and good people of good faith can disagree. And I am firmly against using genocide in any conversation. Firmly against it. Firmly against it. And we can talk more about that. I'll happily have that debate any day of the week. But the moment you say that genocide is taking place against the white race, then you have to deal with the definition of genocide rather than the conversation that you want to have, rather than the empowerment that you want to give. Moreover, you make yourself look like a Looney Tunes. And that is, it's very easy for Ibram here then to say, these people believe that they're going to get genocided. And everyone then says, and get out of your echo chamber. And if you're in an echo chamber and you're not talking to people outside of the white sympathetic sphere, then you're going to say, well, by God, we are being genocided. Well, go out into the real world, get out of the echo chamber and tell people, you think the white race is getting genocided? And they're going to look at you like you are insane. So you have to know how to speak to the rest of the world, not just to your echo chamber. Never use white genocide. Other white Americans have been led, you might as well say that we're controlled by lizards, lizard people. That is the same kind of response that you'll get. Other white Americans have been led to fear America's teachers, 79% of whom are white, as though that matters, as though them being white matters. We have a response for that. They're anti-white. They're teaching anti-whiteism. It doesn't matter how white they are. They could be as white as newly fallen snow. Instructing kids to identify in racial terms, as Blake Masters, a Republican candidate, which means that he was gelded. To become a Republican, you actually have to, you get put into a stall and you bend over and they geld you. And then you can receive your Republican badge. That's how you know these people. Blake Masters, a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, said in May, quote, you are good or bad, depending on what you look like. At this point, it is straight up anti-white racism. Never say that. Never combine the anti-white slur racism with the powerful word anti-white. I don't think we're allowed to say that. Who says that? What a limp Richard he is to say, I don't think we're allowed to say that. Where are our masters? Are we allowed to say, where are the anti-white masters of this? Are we allowed to say that? But let's call it what it is, said Blake. No, it's just anti-whiteism, Blake. You're going in the right direction. Maybe we'll give you honorary testicles at some point. Even the GOP politicians and operatives don't openly, quote, call it what it is. They end up echoing Masters nonetheless, saying, without saying that, quote, can you just see these people scurrying away from Ibram here? Are we allowed? No, you're in their story. You're not allowed. You get it? You're not allowed. You got to get out of their story. Even when GOP politicians and operatives don't openly call it what it is, they end up echoing Masters nonetheless, saying without saying that, quote, critical race theory is explicitly anti-white. To use the words of Christopher F. Rufo, a travel documentary filmmaker turned leading critic of CRT. So critical race theory is explicitly anti-white. He's right. He's absolutely right. It is anti-white from start to finish. Never call it CRT. Just call it anti-whiteism. At his final campaign rally in Loudoun County, Virginia, Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin said, and this will be the last he cares for white people, or makes it seem like he does, quote, what we won't do is teach our children to view everything through a lens of race, where we divide them. No, that's exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be teaching white children that they are being attacked on the basis of their race, Youngkin. That's what we need to be doing. This idea, this Tucker Pucker idea, this conservative idea, this Republican idea that has been failing for all of our lives, parents' lives, grandparents' lives, that we're just going to studiously, ignorantly ignore the reality that we are being attacked on the basis of our race and assert in the face of that victimization that it's about ideas. It's just about ideas. Why do they keep doing this? And then pretend like we don't understand. We're not going to do that anymore. And sooner or later, it's going to be people like me who are running for office and people like you, Youngkin, who are going to also, I guess, be trying your best to get a badge for honorary testicles. What we won't do is teach our children to view everything through a lens of race, where we divide them into buckets. And one group is an oppressor and the other is a victim. So he's not even talking about the white race, not even talking about the white. And we pit them against each other and we steal their dreams. So who actually is Youngkin talking about? It's all of one group of the groups against one group. It's not, he's making it sound here like it's, well, maybe in some schools they teach that Hispanics are victimizing blacks. In another school, they teach that blacks are victimizing Jews. And maybe in another, no, jackass, it's all anti-white. It is all anti-white, period. Republicans provoked a backlash against CRT, and the Democrats have this completely wrong, as is always the case. They have it completely wrong. The Republicans have it, they're all anti-whites who call themselves Democrats, anti-whites who call themselves Republicans. Republicans provoked a backlash against CRT, which they also call anti-racism or wokeism. You don't do that because you're not a midget stick and a midget wit. So those who are going free, you never refer to anti-whites and their doctrine of anti-whiteism as anti-racism or wokeism. When somebody says that, you immediately are looking at somebody who has been lobotomized. Their backlash won 2021 elections, but it wasn't a backlash of parents. William Selton found in his close study. That means he's going to come to an anti-white conclusion. In his close study of polling data, it was a backlash of white people. It's right. It was white mothers in particular, because regrettably, white women control the relationships in the white race, and that's a big problem. So it was mothers, though, who are being empowered by the lexicon of going free and all over the state of Virginia, in part because of great work like champions like Franklin. And I met with him the other day. We'll talk about that a little later. But in part because of his great work, because we have champions going out everywhere, spreading the lexicon of going free. And now these mothers, instead of having to see themselves, you remember a Karlin Boroshenko? And she said, I went to this meeting. I went to that meeting. These people are saying anti-white, anti-whiteism, Western kind. They're all being poisoned by these people over there. No, we are those people. We are the people in the PTA meetings. We are the angry mothers. What has happened is we have merely given them the tools to empower themselves so that they don't have to play the villain in the anti-white narrative. That's what happened. Somebody who's out there and who is battling Karlin, we can say anything good about Karlin, is that she is out there on the forefront of battling this anti-whiteism by another name because she's anti-white. But she's out there on the forefront and she has accurately identified the people who are behind changing the concepts that the discussion is being discussed with, addressed with. So we can thank her for that. Thank you, Boroshenko. We hope you will end your anti-whiteism soon. So we can agree it was white women who finally hearing that this is anti-whiteism that's being taught to their children in schools, and their eyes suddenly go wide and they say, oh my God, I can stand up against that. I will stand up against that. And then you have another Republican shill, ballless wonder who shows up with a bunch of talking points, empty suit, and he makes some references. And then the Democrats who call themselves, who are anti-whites, who call themselves Democrats, they roll in and they say, that's the dog whistling. Well, in a way, it kind of is. It's a Republican empty-suited dickless shill that is showing up and is saying things that he or she knows will get votes for him or herself or itself or they self or whatever the heck it is. So in a way, it is a kind of a dog whistle. The Democrats are right when it comes to that, but not for the reasons that the Democrats think. These people are just as anti-white as the Democrats. They just want to run for office on the other side of the spectrum. Maybe they have a little bit of a different economic stance or something of this nature. And so they're making this appeal, and all these white mothers, they then go out there and vote for these people. That's how Youngkin won, but you'll hear nothing more about that. He'll stand up for another group of people, though. Rest assured, it won't be whites. How many Americans know that the claim that anti-racism is harmful to white people is one of the basic mantras of white supremacist ideology? Now, this is the problem, and this is where we get into the nuance. Americans are familiar with white supremacist movements like the Klan, skinheads, neo-Nazis, and the Proud Boys. By the way, what they can't do with us is I've never been friendly with villains in the anti-white narrative. I've never been one of these characters. I've always argued against, and I have brought thousands over the years away from hating non-white races to loving themselves and loving our people and wanting to protect our children. There is the widest of gulfs between the one activity and the other. So they can never say, for the practice of going free, with any ability to point to instances in history, like they can with others, they can never say with us that, well, Jason was actually, Jason was actually X, Y, or Z. It would have to be lies from whole cloth. And that's a lot harder to do than to cite the kinds of things they can for other folks. I think that is pretty easily understood. But they don't seem to recognize white supremacist ideology, the most venomous form of racist ideology, writes Ibram here. I suspect that many Americans don't know how much white supremacist ideology shapes their political thought and America's political discourse and allows juries to exonerate racism and convict anti-racism. All right, so that seems to be a comment on the Rittenhouse trial. This was written after the Rittenhouse trial, right? Verdict was given. So in other words, in the anti-white narrative, the white person, no matter what the evidence of the particular case, always needs to be convicted and sentenced and punished, because the white person is always the villain in the anti-white narrative. You can palliate as a white person to a degree the charge or the essence of being the villain by being anti-white, but it's only for a time, and you have to be you have to be the most extreme anti-white for all the ages to come in all the ages of the past. An impossible feat. And so if you're a white person, you're eventually going to be devoured by the anti-white machine. With his anti-white mania graphic, Tucker Carlson yet again presented the most dangerous mantra in American politics. Attacks on racism are really attacks on white Americans that led to white people being harmed. Quote, anti-racism is anti-white, is the old and explosive mantra of avowed white supremacists. So I'm going to tell you folks right now, everybody's going free, never use the slogan, anti-racist is a code word for anti-white. We can celebrate Bob Whitaker for and the folks who worked with Bob for the campaigns that they conducted, that they thought that were the best for that time in spreading that, as well as that rest of that 200 plus word mantra. That actually I can read it. I think I could probably pull it up. And we should congratulate them for that work, bringing white people's attention, albeit within the anti-white narrative, to the real objective of anti-whites. But what does it do? It keeps you inside of the anti-white narrative. And when you say this now, when you say anti-racist is a code word for anti-white, you are identifying with an individual who has already been determined to be a white supremacist and made statements, and as I say, self-avowed statements. And so when you do that, it's very easy for anti-whites to conflate you with him. Look, using the exact same verbiage as this guy. If you use the lexicon of going free, they're going to say, look, you're just like that Jason guy. And in his intro, he says, all races are welcome. They do have all races participate in putting an end to anti-whiteism. They do. So what do you want to be associated with? What do you want to be most, how do you want to be most effective for our people? It doesn't take anything away from the great work of people who were doing the best they could with the tools they had and the time, the context that they were in. It doesn't take anything away from them whatsoever. And as I say, I celebrate every single one of those people for their great efforts, when those efforts were in keeping with my morality of love for our people and putting an end to the victimization of our people, rather than hatred on the activities or actions of other people's. So this is why I said it's a very nuanced thing here. There's a big difference between yesteryear and where we are today. So this goes on, is the old explosive mantra of avowed white supremacists. It has been their organizing vehicle, fueling their rage, fueling their backlashes, fueling their delusions. Now, there was a very stupid thing was said to me recently, that isn't this just and maybe it comes out of this article, actually. Isn't it just the white people creating their own story where they are the heroes? Isn't that just a natural consequence, a natural phenomenon that was just going to happen once enough pressure was applied? Bullshit. It is not. This is from scratch. It is assiduous labor of volunteers, of people dedicating their lives in the face of an anti-white aggressor that has the ability to tell the world that they are evil for their love. This is, and we can look, by the way, into the future for all of the rest of the countries of the West to see whether or not it's a natural consequence of the pressure being applied against us, because we can look to our people in South Africa, where it is much worse than it is here. And what do we not see? We do not see a story created in which we are the good guys. We do not see the entire process strategically with I should say, I use strategy again, a strategy of forethought, conscious will of forethought in every single one of the steps, and the scientific method applied to everything introduced with the intent to create a story for us to live in. It is not a natural consequence. It doesn't, that is the dumbest ass thing to say, that this just happens automatically. It is to try to rob credit from people who deserve credit. And the reason why communism fell is because people didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to invest. They didn't want to try because they didn't get credit for their efforts. This is not the way of Western kind. The way of Western kind is to celebrate those who invest themselves, their time, their energy, their love, the victimization that they suffer, etc., is to celebrate those who do that work, which is why we celebrate Bob Whitaker when the things he did, for me personally, fell in line with my moral imperative, which is why we celebrate Tim Murdoch with the things that he did when the things that he did fell in line with my moral imperative. Because we want to be men and women of the West. That is the right thing to do. That is the right way to behave. All year long, this white supremacist mantra has been fueling the fueling what Martin Luther King Jr. once called the white backlash against last year's racial reckoning. It is inciting voter suppression policies and insurrections to protect white political supremacy. So you see, you can't have a conversation with Ibram. So there'll be folks who try, because they're not going free yet, and I feel sorry for them. I hope they can go free at some point in the near future. But there'll be folks who will take like their 5 main tools that they use with inside the anti-white narrative and lose fabulously against Ibram and the like. They'll try to point out the data. They'll say, well, this is what is really happening. And then it's a he versus she. I mean, it's just on and on of here are all the ways to fail. And instead, we could talk with Ibram with the tools of going free, and people could get over their petty jealousies, and we could succeed. And then also give credit where credit is due. And so, of course, Ibram's going to go on here and say this is also what's called a straw man. It's a fallacy, where he's saying that if white people, if there's racial justice, which of course we know is anti-whiteism, the infliction of injury on white people, if that doesn't take place, then that which resists against it is a white backlash and against racial reckoning, which we heard, remember, in Loudoun County, right down the road, that wonderful black woman, anti-white woman, head of the NAACP, also head of the teachers board, where she was given the speech, and she said there's going to be a racial reckoning, and she ran down the line. She went on for like seriously 2 minutes about all the ways that white people are going to be victimized for this reckoning. Maybe it didn't happen. Maybe just ask CNN. It says, it is inciting swarms of lies, insults, threats, and simulated killings of anti-racist Americans who are branded as anti-white. It is inciting the false claim that anti-racist books and education are harmful to white children. It is inciting bans of those books and lessons. It is inciting the second assassination of King. It's so absurd when they talk about MLK and they just refer to him by his last name, King, as you know what they're doing there. They're trying to say that's the ultimate authority. He is in the anti-white narrative the replacement for Jesus Christ. And so, of course, in Christianity and therefore the religion of Western civilization, because so many white people practice it, Jesus Christ is Lord and King, and now you have a new king, and that's the whole idea behind this usage of just king to justify those bans. So a second assassination, boy, that is some serious hyperbole right there. Some Democrats have predictably made it a bipartisan affair. As Nicole Hannah-Jones, the creator of the 1619 Project, recently told the Los Angeles Times, this idea that racial reckoning has gone too far and now white people are the ones suffering is the most predictable thing in the world if you understand American history. Well, of course, there is going to be disputes within any group of anti-whites, whether they call themselves Democrats or Republicans or what have you. There's going to be disputes about how you get from point A to point B, how you get from where we are today to greater victimization to Western kind tomorrow. You see, going free is more than just a slogan. It is a way of life. It is a story that you live in, and you write yourself in there as the hero, and we empower you with the tools with which to do that, right? Centrists told abolitionists that they'd gone too far and provoked the backlash, causing Southern secession. Centrists told King, and other civil rights activists that they've gone too far. Okay, so I see what he's doing here. He's trying to say that there are these mealy-mouthed anti-whites who are trying to rein in the more legitimate anti-whites who want to get to the racial reckoning, which of course is anti-whiteism, the epitome of victimization of Western kind. Anti-racism, we're just going to skip the rest of that because that's obviously what he's saying there. Well, I see James Carville, the Democrat political strategist James Carville, a one insane essay. He was obviously hit really hard on the head at birth. Said after the 2021 election, they're expressing a language that people just don't use, and there's backlash and a frustration at that. So what Carville's trying to say is keep victimizing Western kind, just don't say so as openly as you are today. That's what he's saying, because he's obviously much more cunning than the folks who are in charge now. You know, they've had a lot of this, oh, you get to be in because you're female. Oh, you get to be in because you're of that race. Oh, you, rather than smartest one, most successful ones get to be in. So now since they've had so many of that other way of choosing, they have people there, of course, along with the hubris of domination over Western civilization. And they're like, let's just say it like it is. Let's just get to it as quickly as possible. Let's just victimize these white people. Was that it on that? Anti-racism is anti-white is the mantra dividing the Democratic Party, especially since 2021 elections. It is the mantra unifying the Republican Party. No, it's not. See, this is where, if Ibram is a Democrat, this obviously demonstrating how ignorant he is of the Republican Party, especially since the 2020 election. There are numerous variations on this mantra, quote, wokeism, or anti-racism, or critical race theory, or the 1619 Project, or cancel culture, or Black Lives Matter, or anyone challenging racial inequity is said. Do you see how this is entirely in the anti-white narrative? He is beyond neck deep in the anti-white. I mean, this guy is submerged in the Marianas Trench of anti-white narrative. So you're never going to find this guy, and you're never going to be able to reach him with anything other than radical anti-whiteism. So you don't bother having a conversation. We can just poke holes in what he is saying here. But this idea that there's a unification of the Republican Party, and that these anti-white slurs and names that anti-whites, for example, take for themselves, like anti-racist, is somehow unifying, is for Republicans, etc., is totally absurd. If anything, idiots in the white sympathetic sphere, of course, Republican, that just goes without question. It's just redundant to say idiot and Republican together. They are going to absolutely take up these words, these mantras that the anti-whites come up with, and by so doing, poison themselves, which they have done, again, for all of my life, your life, parents' lives, grandparents' lives. How long do people have to be dumb? I don't know. I guess many of them forever. Yes, that bottleneck that our race is going to go through is looking narrower and narrower the closer we get to it. And variations on this mantra have become so ubiquitous in the American political, I don't think you can modify ubiquitous. It either is or isn't. But I'm glad that you have a 6-figure salary, Ibram. I'm glad that you probably have yourself a nice white wife and a nice white girlfriend and a nice big house in a white neighborhood and a beautiful car that you have polished up by white people probably. I'm glad, because you definitely should be able to just be a loser at your profession and still make that kind of money. In the American political discourse that people can easily dismiss or deny its origin in white supremacist thought. So here we go. This was the thing that I was told about this article. He writes on here, when Robert Whitaker, 76, died in June 2017, white supremacists reflected on his legacy online. So, I mean, I don't want to read a bunch of slander, pardon me, about, I don't know how far they go slandering that guy, but let's see. Whitaker, a former economics professor and Reagan appointee to the Office of Personnel Management, had been radicalized as a young man in opposition to the civil rights swindle whites movement. And let's see, he was a propagandist for more than half a century. But Whitaker's fame among the most extreme white supremacists came toward the end of his life when he wrote a screed. Of course, Ibram uses the word screed, called The Mantra. Now, that would be one place that if I'd been sitting there with Bob, I would say, no, Bob, don't call it The Mantra, because that sounds like, well, you all know. I did look it up, and let's see here. It is over 200 words long. It starts off with, everybody says there is this race problem. Everybody says this race problem will be solved when the third world pours into every white country and only into white countries. The Netherlands and Belgium are just as crowded as Japan or Taiwan, but nobody says Japan or Taiwan will solve this race problem by bringing in millions of third worlders and quote, assimilating, unquote, with them. So he goes on and on like that about like talking about intermarrying to solve the race problem. So this mantra speaks to a couple of mean pathogens that the anti-whites of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of MPs that are out there and that we've identified and found mean curatives for. And each mean curative that we provided can treat many different mean pathogens, like the mean curative that it isn't the similarities that make us the same, it's the differences that make us different. But then toward the end of this mantra, the mantra, he uses the word anti-white twice. And on the basis of using the word anti-white twice, out of 200 plus words, they now, Ibram here, and I'm sure others, want to connect anti-white to white supremacy and everything else under the sun that they could claim as evil. Actually, looks like maybe they quote the whole thing here. Let's see. Everybody says there's this race problem. Everybody says this race problem will be solved in the third world. Whitaker wrote in The Mantra, which he first posted on his blog and website of a neo-Nazi organization in 2006. So, of course, that's that's right. The part that is, I thought back then, I cannot believe I had completely forgotten about that. That is the worst part of it. Is that, let me look at it over here. Yeah. Okay, so that was the worst part of it, was this irreverence, this mockery of Jews who died during the period of World War II. And whatever that number is, we know that far more white people died than Jews. We know that's a fact. But people dying in wartime is a terrible thing, and you're not going to reach normal, ordinary white Canada, white US, white Britain, etc. by mocking deaths of people. It's an immoral thing to do. And so it ends with by calling anti-whites by the name of their taking, which is liberal. Let me see if that's right. I don't remember that. Yeah, well, it says here, but if I, at the end of it, it says, but if, right near the end, it says, but if I tell that obvious truth about the ongoing program of genocide against my race, again, do not call what's happening to us a genocide. That's my position. That's my argument. And as I said, honest people can disagree on that, and we do. But my argument is very simple. You only have a little bit of time for disagreement. There's only a couple things that you can disagree with your audience, and you don't want to waste any of it on the definition of genocide. And I think I saw somebody wrote something like, just show them the UN definition. No, don't say genocide. Don't go into that trap. Don't have to have the conversation of, well, technically genocide means, do not go into that. You want to be a normal person having a normal conversation, and you're going to talk about white erasure. White erasure happens biologically. White erasure happens when statues are pulled down. White erasure happens. So if I would have been sitting there with Bob, I would have said, don't say genocide, say white erasure. Bob probably would have said, who knows what Bob would have said, right? Most people in the anti-white, in the white sympathetic sphere would tell me to piss off, but that's fine. We'll just keep doing what works. But he says here, okay, the obvious truth about the ongoing, but his heart was in the right place. I'm not saying anything negative about it. At those moments where he's trying to, in a moral way, serve the well-being of our people, we're in perfect alignment. Only diverge where he diverges from my morality, where he becomes white negative. So, ongoing program of genocide against my race, the white race, liberals, and respectable conservatives. No, that's terrible too. So liberals, don't call the anti-whites by the names of their taking. It's calling them liberals. Then he's referring to anti-white white people as respectable conservatives. Do not refer to anti-white people with this sort of snarky, irreverent, it's the sarcasm, an ironic usage of words. They're respectable. Don't do that, because your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. When you say respectable conservatives, that's the opposition. What does your mind tell you that you are? You are not respectable, right? So he says, the white race liberals and the respectable conservatives agree that I am look at, he's talking here. I disagree with this too. Maybe I should have looked at this a long time ago and talked about it, the whole mantra. Maybe we'll do that one of these days. But this part of it here, I totally disagree. If I tell the obvious truth about the ongoing program of genocide against my race. So first of all, you're saying there's a program afoot to genocide the Western kind. So that goes right into these crazy notions that there's this little cabal and they are orchestrating and moving things around in order to genocide Western kind. That is going to be impossible to prove. It's going to sound to your audience, it's going to sound like a wild conspiracy theory. It's going to make you look, since you can't prove it, since you can't say, well, look, I have all of these, you're going to sit through all of these hundreds of videos of hidden camera video that I have of them talking about. No, you can't prove it. So your audience is going to think you're crazy. You're crazy for saying that. So don't say that. Ongoing program. Don't say that Western kind is being genocided. If you want to talk about white erasure. We're being white erased from our towns. We're being white erased from our history books. We're being white erased from the pedestals that used to carry our statues. We're being white erased from our halls of record. Every person you talk to will be able to understand that and will have a hard time to claim that that's not happening. They might try to justify it. They might try to say, well, it should happen, but they're not going to be able to say it's not happening. They're not going to be able to say that you're just loony for saying so. In a conversation, you could have an author in a rag write that no white erasure is taking place. That's because they're not having a face-to-face conversation with you. We're trying to get to the people we can reach. Remember, that's the audience that matters. So against my race, the white race, and here now he speaks with the second part of this sentence. He speaks as an anti-white. He actually says, if we put a dash right after the word that, he actually says, I am a. What's your mind going to do with that? I am a. Just like all those people saying like that they aren't politically correct, right? Or they'll say, I am politically, and then they'll follow that up with the word incorrect. Words have meaning to your mind. It's the tools with which we think, the only tools with which we think. You cannot say things, unless your intent is to tell a joke. You cannot say these things and not internalize them. So he says, this is the worst part. I don't even want to say it. I had forgotten all about this. He says, the white race, liberals, and respectable conservatives agree that I am a, and then he writes, my God, Nazi who wants to kill 6 million Jews. Those are not my words. There's nothing funny about that. There's nothing, that's what he wrote. I didn't know that was that bad. All right, let's continue. I thought Ibram was lying. The mantra ends with what has become the new mantra in American politics. Quote, they say they are anti-racist. What they are is anti-white. Over the next decade, and particularly after Barack Obama's election. So on the basis of that, they're going to take anti-white and they're going to say, well, they're going to try to say, well, you all say anti-white. He said anti-white. He talked about, he was on these neo-Nazi forums and he talked about, he mocked the death of Jews and this. So that is why you have to be so punctilious when it comes to sticking to the practice of going free. You don't go off into the field of all of these other discussions, all of these other conversations, all of these other things within the anti-white narrative. You have to stick to your roses, your bright white roses. Over the next decade, and particularly after Barack Obama's election, a self-identified swarm, again, not a good choice, That swarm might be fun to those who participated, but to normal white people, that seems scary. And Ibram can use it easily to demonize them. Of online trolls, posted quotes and reprinted the mantra online whenever they could, and attacked anti-racists as racists whenever they could. So the swarm, and that was one of the other things that I recall, that when I was trying to prevent people from attacking Bob and the whole community that had formed around him, one of the things that I really objected to was that they were using the word racist, the anti-white slur racist. And that is the word that destroyed Western kind and Western civilization. You cannot take it back. You can never use it. Never say anti-white racist. Never just say racist. Never use that concept. In your house with your children, it should be the R word, and it should be considered worse than the F word or anything else. You never say, with your children, never say that word. It is a cuss word in our house. That's what you say. Whitaker's mantra has been linked to some of the deadliest acts of white supremacist terror over the past decade. Anders Breivik murdered 77 people in Norway. What a bizarre case this is, too. That guy. In 2011, on that day of his terror attack, the leader of the swarm, identified by the Southern Poverty Law, the Southern Filthy Rich Law Center, as Michigan anti-Semite, so anti-Jewish. That's Tim Murdoch, was among some 1,000 people to whom Breivik sent his 1,500-page manifesto. The manifesto raged against anti-racist witch hunts and how. So do you see how weak and detrimental that is, and how the slightest excuse to label whites as racist is continually sought? Terrible. Terrible. It railed against the, quote, quasi-religious undercurrent to the quasi-religious undercurrent to the anti-racist movement, close quote. It seethed against the, quote, ridiculous pursuit of equality, close quote. The amount of stupidity is stupefying. And again, Breivik numbered himself among the real victims. Quote, I consider myself to be an anti-racist, anti-fascist, anti-Nazi, he wrote. Quote, that's the main reason why I oppose cultural communism, European multiculturalism. They are the Nazis. They are the fascists. They are the racists. I have witnessed much racism in my time, but 90% of it has been against Europeans. You know, it's sad that we could not get to that guy and prevent that massacre that he inflicted, that he committed. Who knows? Absolutely disgusting. Dylan Root, nobody will be, unless they are mailing me or emailing me something to give me an FU. Nobody's going to be emailing me any sort of manifesto about some sort of horrible thing that they want to do to innocent human beings. You can rest assured, because we are so far beyond ever talking about, ever considering any sort of violence whatsoever. Nothing will be reclaimed with voting or violence. Not in this context, the context in which we live, across the West. Dylan Roof. Let's just skip that. What is it? Oh my God. Ibram says here, Roof lived in the same town as Whitaker. Ergo, no, what an anti-white piece of garbage Ibram is. Whitaker didn't have, there's nothing that he just wrote there that was proof that Whitaker had anything to do with that monster, Dylan Roof. And if that happened in South Carolina, don't they have the death penalty? If you go into a church and you murder a bunch of people, how much worse can it be? Many Americans have had contact with Whitaker's ideas, likely without knowing it. In the days after Roof's massacre, Morris Dees, there's a real anti-white for you. I think he is so slimy with anti-whiteism. Everywhere he goes, he leaves a slug trail. And his buddy, J. Richard Cohen, the founder of the president of the Southern Filthy Rich Law Center, pointed this out. Quote, in recent years, extremists have distilled the notion of white genocide to the mantra, parts of which show up on billboards throughout the South, as well as internet chat rooms. Close quote. They wrote in June 2015, quote, it proclaims diversity equals white genocide, and diversity means chasing down the last white person, blaming multiculturalism for undermining the white race. How much more powerful would it have been? And I've talked to some of these guys, and they agree. If instead of having on a billboard that diversity equals white genocide, they had used with their dollars that they put out with that, they had used some of the meme curatives, some of the powerful, scientifically proven meme curatives that we have created and we have put through trials and have demonstrated success. How much more good would they have done had they had put some of that up instead of this genocide of Western kind that isn't going to be. Everyone thinks, again, I don't care what it says at the UN. The actionable definition is piles of emaciated bodies or piles of dead bodies. So that's what you have to deal with. This is not a world of wishes. It's a world of the reality that we have to deal with. White supremacists, God, can this guy say anything else? Ibram is tough, isn't he? We're quietly organizing elements of what's now Donald Trump's base from the earliest days of Trump's presidential campaign in 2015. His support has been, of course, they want to connect anybody who gets in the way of anti-whiteism in the least bit is going to be branded with all of the synonyms for what anti-whites call evil. So ergo, Donald Trump, even though we know that he doesn't give a damn about white people. His support has been most concentrated among white Americans who think anti-whiteness is ascendant. Now, there is the trap. Since Ibram is using whiteness, the trap is that you then, as the negative, then you then take it up because you think, well, if he dislikes, then I will like. Do not fall for that trap. Whiteness means that the white race is evil, the white race doesn't exist, and it means persecution. You don't want to be against. You don't want to be for persecution. You don't want to be against the people who are against persecution. That's the trap that is going to spring in a very big way if more white people take up whiteness. And by God, I do not produce whiteness. I've never visited a whorehouse. Trump voters typically considered racism against white people to be a bigger problem than racism against people of color. So there you have excluding Western kind from humanity with this anti-white race, people of color, and using the word racism to trying to revive it as a both directions and put in the mouths of Trump supporters. Do not use it. Among white Americans who don't think there's much anti-white racism, again, if Ibram is going to use anti-white racism, why would you? Support for Republican presidential candidates has actually fallen over the past decade. Okay, Whitaker did not create the mantra, writes Ibram. He simply reproduced it. He reproduced it. Since the very first Civil Rights Act, swindle whites, white supremacists. Could you imagine living with Ibram? I have to sympathize with his boyfriend right now. Or, I mean, it's not offensive to Ibram to have a boyfriend, is it? Is it a boyfriend? Or is it a girlfriend? Or is it a they friend? I have to sympathize with whatever. Because could you imagine this guy? He's like, do you have the white supremacist coffee? What's the white supremacist news today? Is the white supremacist phone ringing? Or is that just the bell in my head? Whitaker didn't create the mantra, he goes on. The swindle whites has its, okay, so it's white supremacists have cast anti-racist bills as racist toward white people. All right, yeah, this is from, it looks like he's taken a little journey into the past here. And it was so dumb. The things that white people came up with to defend ourselves are so infinitely lame. They're so lame. They're so lame. Okay, it defines citizenship, granted it to African Americans, and affirmed that all citizens are equally protected by the law. But President, as it should. If everybody is going to be a citizen, then everybody needs to have the same treatment in front of the law. But President Andrew Johnson vetoed it, arguing that the distinction of race and color is by the bill made by the bill made to operate in favor of the colored against the white race. I didn't read the bill, so I don't know if that's accurate or not. In an address to Congress in 1867, Johnson opposed voting rights for black men. Why just black men? Was it just black men? Because women weren't allowed to vote, I guess. So that's why they're saying that. Okay, fearing the dread of, I'm not going to say, it's a word that the ear is against the door. Supremacy and the subjugation of white people of the South. In his best-selling 1874 book, The Journey, I swear to you, we have had nothing but, no, that's not true. It seems like when you look back at the folks that have been in the vanguard, if you will, of advocating for us, have been so blinkered and incompetent. It defies explanation. It's so unreal, the things they came up with and that they tried to use against the anti-whites. Let's see. Now, that doesn't mean that there were good people doing good work. I'm talking about at the vanguard, there were quite a few who were just unbelievably dumb. They were good without question. And we have learned from them, great people, wonderful people. And we stand on their shoulders. We see as far as we do because we stand on their shoulders. But sometimes it has to be pointed out. We have to say that this is the defenders at the gates, by far and large, were totally incompetent. They really didn't have the brains to run a bumper car theme ride. It's just unbelievable. Okay, when a civil rights plank was added to the Democrat Party platform, Southern segregationists walked out of it. We all know this. Popular. What are you trying to get at with this? Just come on, get to the point. We don't need your enfeebled history lesson. Abernathy, Jim Crow segregationist, U.S. representative from Mississippi, feared the Civil Rights Act 57 would create nothing short of an assemblage of power, federal meddlers, and spies created for the purpose of tormenting, abusing, and embarrassing Southern white people. Yeah, all of that. It really feels like when I look back at the decisions made by a lot of these so-called leaders, it's like watching painfully Down syndrome people. God bless them, wonderful people. Down syndrome. Some of them they do wonderful things. They do great in life. They get a job, and I feel very bad for them. We all have handicaps. We all do. But it's like looking back and seeing a person with that Down syndrome playing chess against name your favorite chess champion. It's just that painful to me. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Oh, yes. They instead claimed the anti-racist efforts to remedy racial inequality constituted, quote, reverse discrimination or reverse racism. Boy. Okay, let's see. What was this? Okay, Ellender, the Jim Crow segregationist, Louisiana framed the voting. Okay, discrimination being practiced. All right, 1976, Ronald Reagan said, if you happen to belong to an ethnic group not recognized by the federal government as entitled to special treatment, you are a victim of reverse discrimination. Again, Ronald Reagan, all these conservatives continue to celebrate this guy. When you look at what he actually did while he was in office, he should be the furthest thing from a big celebration. But yeah, saying, oh, it's reverse discrimination because white people inherently are discriminators. 5 decades since the civil rights movement, Republicans and many non-Republicans have expressed 2 conflicting racial mantras. 1, racism no longer exists. Boy. 2, racism is spreading against white people. You just pull your pants down and bend over and grab your ankles. That is what the Republicans and conservatives and all, that's what they do. Please, it's not you, it's your leaders. Come away from them and go free. You don't have to be that dumb anymore. You can learn how to be brilliant. You can dominate in your conversations. You can access your true physical, mental, and spiritual potential, but you're not going to do it with your head on the pavement, watching the anti-whites, a line of them going by you. Trust me. Let me take whatever aspect of the story you want me to be in, and I'll just take 2 dumb positions inside of that aspect. White supremacist ideology lives on in what Heather McGee calls the zero-sum myth, the idea that progress for people of color necessarily comes at white folks' expense. Well, where's it come from? Where's it come from? If you are going to be hiring, like all the companies do, national, international, and they celebrate every quarter how many more non-white people that they have hired rather than white people, where are these jobs coming from? How are the white people not being victimized and discriminated against? They just fallen out of heaven? The zero-sum myth erases the past and present of abolitionists and anti-racist movements, all anti-white garbage, which have aided ordinary white people. Aided ordinary white people? If fearmongers about the future, about the future. If white people are not worshipped in school, well, there you have it right there. There breaks out the anti-white straw man. White people have to be worshipped or they're going to be eradicated. So nobody's making that argument. And we outline how anti-whites do this in Go Free. Let's see if he continues with this. Zero-sum, okay, fearmongers, that if white people are not worshipped, then they will be demonized. If white people don't reign supreme, oh my gosh, can you believe this guy makes 6 figures? Then they will be subjugated. If white folks don't hoard resources and opportunities, then they will be starved. If white people cannot kill at will, he actually wrote that. If white people cannot kill at will, then they will be killed at will. This is a very ill person. Ibram is very unwell, and his boyfriend knows it, or girlfriend or it friend knows it, how unwell Ibram is. White violence is presumed to be self-defense. Defending yourself against a white supremacist is presumed to be a criminal act. Wow. This is a very unwell person. Extreme fear perhaps breeds this extreme fear. White supremacists probably fear revenge, retaliation, the table's turning. Well, anti-whites talk about that all the time. They talk about how it's time for revenge. It's time for, well, that's what retribution means. That's what a reckoning means. So Ibram in this very article is trying to tell you a reckoning is just this is nothing bad for white people. And then he comes down here and he's saying, well, they probably fear a reckoning because of what we're going to do to them. Like the enslavers of old. Let's see. Okay, let me continue. White supremacy probably fears retaliation. The table's turning as they wipe the blood of democracy, of equality, of the dying and dead off their hands. I can see Ibram he's a character in an anti-white movie that is just drinking the blood of the young of animals, mammalian animal. He is not a real person. This can't be real. But of course, I'm sure he's real. They know the level of brutality they have leveled against people of color and their white allies. Okay, think about what he's saying right there. So maybe you're 5 years old. You know the level of brutality that you have leveled against the non-white world. And now you fear what you deserve, 5-year-old white child. Everyone think about that reality because that's the reality we live under. What are the 9 words? Atonement cannot be made for a grievance never committed. You learn that in Go Free. So it doesn't matter if you're 5, if you're white, you know the violence that you have leveled against non-white people, and it is time for you to pay. That's how the anti-white narrative works. It is a narrative, it is a story, and it ends in a bloody way for us. As you can see, Ibram is setting it up here. He's saying you all deserve to be dehumanized because of how you've been monsters, and therefore you deserve whatever we dish out. So if we stay our hand one jot, it's because of how good we are. If we don't kill every last one of you, or if we don't deprive you of everything you've ever earned, if we don't prevent you from the school that the school that you wanted to get, or only prevent you from the school you wanted to get into, only prevented you from getting the job you earned, only prevented you from having the raise and the promotion that you deserved over the course of your life, all of these onlys over the course of your whole life, at least we let you breathe. That is what Ibram has said. This is a manifesto. You want to know a manifesto? What this piece of shit wrote here is a manifesto to slaughter, to deprive white people of everything that we do in our lives, to legitimize all the harm that could be inflicted upon us. What a piece of garbage. This is a manifesto. Like the enslavers of old, 5-year-old, sleeping with guns under their pillows. They know the level of brutality they have leveled against people of color and their white allies. They probably can't imagine that indigenous anti-racists, just italicized, want their land back and aren't genocide. That is sickening. That is sickening what he just wrote. Can you believe that? They probably, is the mic still working? This is insane. I can't believe they haven't shut me off speaking the truth to what this POS is saying here. Where did that go? They probably can't imagine that indigenous, in other words, non-white, by indigenous, they mean the rightful owners of the land. Bullshit. Every race of people, you anti-white POS, has acquired land in the exact same way, just like the white race. Every single one. So the indigenous anti-racist, so what they mean, of course, there is the good guys, but what they are actually are the anti-white POSs, stormtroopers, the anti-white terrorist troops of the anti-white army. All they want is their land back. But they're not genocidal. How do you turn over all of what you have inherited from people who actually built a country? Because it's not the land, it's the country, it's the civilization that they would like to have, not just a piece of turf that their ancestors lost in a contest with other non-white people and with white people. That's not it. They want the country. They want the money. They want the white women. They want the cars. Some of them, not all of them. So how do you not end up, if you create a situation where you have biological white erasure, where that is the probable outcome, then that is exactly what you want. That Asian good guys, so that's what that the Asian good guys, they just want to be visible. They don't want to render white people invisible. How many spots where that one person goes on that billboard, where that one model goes? There's a spot for one model. How do you not render the white person invisible that has to come off of that billboard so that an Asian person can go on that billboard? The Latino and Middle Eastern, so he's just going to go right to all the non-white people. So it's a non-white, anti-white war on Western kind, is what Ibram is saying here. They just want to flee violence and don't want to invade predominantly white nations. There's plenty of places they can go where there isn't violence, but okay. White supremacists are mobilizing against an anti-white army that isn't mobilizing. Oh, we're just carrying daisies, the anti-whites would say about themselves, as they white erase us from every piece of our civilization, as they write a manifesto. No army is mobilizing as they write a manifesto that legitimizes the victimization of our people on every single level. But no army is mobilizing. No army is mobilizing as anti-white shock troops are in the streets and 2 summers ago and burning down hundreds of cities on fire at one time. But no army is mobilizing. Then again, if there is an army that is mobilizing, that is coming, that is here, it is made up of white supremacists. Their carnage is here, their ideology too. Nothing in reality. It's all fiction. It's all just their anti-white narrative. And then the mentally ill people that pick up this garbage and then go out and do something horrible. We are the ones who get in between the anti-whites, causing crazy people to do sadistic things. That's why they throttle this channel. That's why they throttle all the work we do. And by the way, I'll be talking about that in just a minute. This is the end of it. Let's see. In 56, 19 senators, 77 representatives issued a manifesto. Parents should not be deprived by government of the right to direct the lives and education of their own children. The legislators wrote they decried destroying the amicable relation between the races. Oh, this was dumb too. This was another one of the dumb arguments that white people made. It's just nothing but rainbows and unicorns until these liberals came around and wanted to mess everything up. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. They feared that, quote, if done, this is certain to destroy the system of public education in some of the states. Well, did it destroy the public education? These Jim Crow congressmen expressed the gravest concern for the dangerous condition. Can you believe Ibram's trying to make the argument that today white people are trying to prevent their children from being taught to hate themselves because of what they are innately? And that's just like when they tried to stop the integration of the schools, which really was just that white people saying, hey, we built this school, it's for our kids. Why are we going to let they can build their own school, right? But they're trying to say, hey, that was just like them trying to prevent non-white children from being accepted into their schools. And they claimed that schooling would get worse. My gosh, could you imagine making that argument, how dumb you would have to be? Schools have gotten a bit worse, dumb. They've gotten a bit worse. He says, he wraps up here, much to the chagrin of his boyfriend, girlfriend, Ifrin, because as soon as he was done with this, he went right back after that thing. History reproduces itself, but when people don't know history or are barred from learning it, how can they ever recognize its reproduction? So what he's saying ultimately is white people shouldn't be allowed to talk, only anti-whites. That's what he's up to. That was the totality of that. I think we walked through that delicately enough.